analyze peasant revolt briefly, because as you know that like I gave you many examples of peasant revolt. For preliminary, of course, it would be relevant. Sometime they can give you a question related to examples also, and sometime they are giving you a general question related to right the significance or the analysis of this peasant revolt. How overall development. See, whenever you think about peasant revolt, so what we are doing right now, I am not giving you example here. I have already you can say discussed all those examples. So, analysis of right you can say the peasant revolt or reactions. Okay. So, what like when you analyze this peasant revolt right during this British period, you have to remember that they were essentially right these reactions, they were essentially due to exploitative character of British government. Fine. So, we should always remember that all these peasant revolt reaction during British period, they were essentially due to the exploitative nature of colonial rule. Due to exploitative nature of colonial rule, right? It was because of those agrarian policy, right? Because of their land revenue policy, right? And these land revenue policy or agrarian policy had adverse effects right on the peasants, right on the peasants, adverse effects on the peasants. And this led to what? Impoverishment of the peasant, and they had to borrow what? Money at high rate of interest from money lenders. So, now they came into contact with money lenders. So, you will see the exploitation continued, and all these peasant revolt you will see this one trend. So, mainly all these peasant revolts, they all had one general feature, that they all were right you can say influenced by those colonial policies of the British. Fine. But you can for understanding you can divide this peasant revolt into two parts. That would be a better idea. One before Gandhi, if we can consider 1970 peasant reaction. So, we can divide this peasant revolt right into two parts. Part 1 before Gandhi and part 2 right after Gandhi. Right before Gandhi, right in this phase you will see different feature. What kind of feature? They were against what? Their immediate right enemies. They were against immediate enemies, right? There was, you can say, right, they were against the landlord. For example, suppose Pabna, they clearly said Pabna, right, that they want to become the rayats of, you can say, the queen. So, their problem was immediate oppressor. They were against immediate enemies. They had less idea about colonial rule. They had poor comprehension about the colonial rule, and they were mainly spontaneous. Mainly, I am not saying that all, but spontaneous, mainly spontaneous. right. And there was no class consciousness also. Class consciousness is a Marxist language, right, that they had class consciousness. They started realizing that they belong to one class. So, that kind of consciousness was not there, but when you will see, right, the movement or the peasant movement after 1917, you will see now, right, they had better idea about colonial rule. They had better idea about colonial rule. Now, there was some national influence also on them, right. And then you will see that there was some now class consciousness. Class consciousness was also there, right. They started realizing that they belong to one class, and gradually they were more organized. Is this fine? So, are you getting, like, we can divide peasant movement into two parts. Part 1 you have example, part 2 you have example, and now in the part 2 after 1917 you will see, or generally, right, in our history book they are saying 1920s and 1930s. So, you will see, right, 1920s and 30s, of course, national influence, more organized, Gandhian influence in the beginning, and gradually I told you that they came under the influence of left. This is very important, they came under the influence of left, and you will see that left influence was more in 1940s. So, some historian they say that, right, 1920s, 30s, 40s peasant movement ideologically they were sometime close to Gandhian movement, sometime close to leftist movement, and they also influenced Congress. So, you will see in the 1920s and 30s, particularly in 30s, right, Indian National Congress also started raising the peasant issue. You will see Karachi Congress, you will see Faizpur, right, you will see the Kisan influence, Kisan manifesto, right, started influencing the Congress. Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhas Bose, they all started talking about Congress Socialist Party, you remember, they also started raising the peasant issue. They wanted to transform the Congress to make it more effective. So, gradually you will see that Indian National Congress also started raising their issue. Gandhiji also started raising their issue. Left politicians also they started raising the issue, right. So, they were better organized, they were better, you can say, placed, right, and you will see that nationalism or colonialism, they now knew the difference, right. So, peasant movement started participating in this kind of, right, reaction. Done. So, overall, right, whenever you are mentioning the peasant reaction, if they ask you discuss the nature of peasant movement. So, nature would be different before 1857, right. They had no idea, they just were reaction, spontaneous reaction. After 1857, some idea and role of intelligentsia, right, and after 1917 more idea and now Gandhian influence, right, and then in 1920s, right, and 1930s they gradually came under the left influence, and 1940s Gandhian influence you cannot see, you will not see Gandhian influence, right, in 1940s, you will see influence of left. Is this fine? So, when you right, prepare this peasant movement, you must prepare this peasant movement in that context, right. So, with this idea, when you will analyze it, right, you will get better idea. So, they can ask you discuss the nature of peasant movement, they can ask you discuss the causes of peasant movement, they can take some example also, sometime indigo, kheda, or you can say any example, 2-3 example they can take and they can ask, right, in main examination, right. In preliminary they are asking, right, generally, right, you can say the example based question. Is this fine? So, with this idea you can better appreciate those examples related to peasant movement.